Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Society of the Eternal Mile podcast. I'm your host, Noah Sias. On today's episode, we're joined by our first brother to the north, or in my case, the east, Eric Leblanc. Eric has been in a slew of bands in and around the Toronto and Ottawa area, including Be the Savior, Dreamer Deceiver, The Prestige, and most recently, The Northern. Make sure you're following the show on all social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all of those at SOTEM Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the show on whatever platform you listen on. You can find the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, YouTube, and now Stitcher. I wanted to talk about Patreon real quick, as a few listeners have inquired about it. I'll keep it relatively short because even I don't like having to hear the speech all the time from other shows. For those not familiar, Patreon is a crowdfunding site for content creators. It's different than other crowdfunding sites where you're paying for an item or some sort of process that you're hoping to see happen over several months and sometimes years. On Patreon, you treat it like a subscription service because it's something that's already in production, so to speak. This show offers 4 different subscription tiers ranging from $1 to $10 a month with no term commitments, cancel anytime. Each tier comes with different perks, including physical items for 2 of them. But anyways, that's enough about that. For more information, head on over to Patreon, patreon.com/SOTEM podcast. And one last announcement, 2 of our previous guests are on tour this month and they both start next week. You can catch Josh Bearden with Distinguisher on Fight Riffs Forever 2, November 18th through December 1st. You can also check Adam Roethlisberger with Archaic on tour with Exhumed, November 15th through December 8th. Check social media for dates. If they're coming through your area, stop on out and show your support, and don't forget to tell them that you heard them on the podcast. My first interaction with Eric was on the Vertebroken tour in summer of 2015. The Prestige was with the package for pretty much the entire run. We all first met in Trenton, New Jersey at Champs. For those familiar with that venue and its location, imagine trying to find parking for an RV and a trailer. And that's how the Prestige came rolling in. They were about a week late to the run because of issues at the border. Once they arrived, I greeted them at their RV door with a, "All right, boys, chips and smokes, let's go." They had a pretty good laugh about that, and if you're not familiar with that, that's a Trailer Park Boys reference. Eric and I talked pretty much daily. A lot of rig conversations and just general goofiness. It was a bummer when the Prestige had to leave the tour a few days early, but things happen out on the road. I would see Eric again later that year on the Canadian Moose Knuckle tour for a couple dates, but I haven't had the chance to see him since. We still keep tabs through social media. He's been busy with the Northern as of recent and has some interesting stories from the past. So here's my conversation with Eric Leblanc. Eric, welcome to the show.
Good to be here, man.
So let's start from the beginning. When did you first get involved with music?
Oh, if we go all the way back, in like the 3rd grade, someone came to my school and they were renting out like saxophones and concert instruments. So I picked up a saxophone. But I really got into music. I was about 13, picked up a guitar, started playing, and I started my first band coming out of high school. That was Be the Savior. It was a learning experience, that's for sure. You know, it was my first look into touring. It was kind of an awkward start point because, you know, coming into it, we were right at the cusp of Facebook starting and MySpace dying. So we didn't really know how to address the platforms very well. So that was quite the learning curve, and I think it set us back a bit. But, you know, fun times, got to do a lot of touring with that band.
So since you've mentioned, you know, that transition point going from MySpace to Facebook, do you ever think about like, man, what did we used to do before Bandcamp?
Yeah, I mean, I came from like a kind of a really old school background. A lot of my friends were kind of like older punk dudes. So starting out, we used to go around and we'd still hand out flyers and just stop random people on the street, really trying really hard to get them to come to our shows, because this was way back before it became dangerous to approach people in public.
Right.
So, yeah, we did a lot of like the old school stuff, which was pretty cool. But, yeah, man, the internet is the great connection. So it's a really handy tool to have.
So with Be the Savior, when did that actually start?
2008, like my last year of high school. I would have been 17 going into the university. And, just one of my friends from class came up to me. He's like, "Hey, I got a couple of pals. They all played in local bands. I had never really been in a band before that." And, he approached me. He's like, "Hey, go learn this song." And it was a song by A Day to Remember. And I showed up and I was like, "Okay, cool." And things just kind of snowballed. We didn't really know what we were doing, just kind of having fun, and started getting shows. And eventually we bought ourselves a van and did a couple of do-it-yourself tours and bookings and all sorts of other things. And it lasted quite some time, a lot of learning. We made a ton of mistakes, which I guess is good, but we also made a ton of friends, which is really important because it helped quite a bit in the future.
Did you guys have any releases?
Yes, we had one release. It was a full length called Argos. Yeah, it was pretty cool. It was like 8 tracks. It was recorded in Ottawa with a guy named Mike Poisson. He did a pretty decent job at the time. We sounded kind of like Parkway Drive meets Geodos, which is a pretty cool mashup, but I loved it.
And that band came to an end in 2011?
Yeah, that's correct. We were just kind of beating the road too much, and we weren't really getting out of it what we were wanting. And everybody was kind of like, "Oh, I'm going to go to university. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that." So a lot of people moved on, and I just kept trucking along with our drummer Jake at the time, and we made Dreamer Deceiver. In 2012, we started writing and launched in 2013.
And Dreamer Deceiver had one release, 2014's Generations.
Yes, that's correct.
And that release was through We Are Triumphant, which is always a tricky subject to talk about.
Yeah. We knew kind of what we were getting into, and our contract with them reflected that. We made sure we negotiated very well. We did leave. They kind of had some bad press, and it was getting difficult for us to, get bookings and have people want to work with us because we were associated with them. So we slipped quietly out the back door when things started to hit the fan. But truthfully, between us and the label, we never had any issues. We really got a lot of reach out of it, so it was helpful. But right up until the end, I can't really say anything bad about it at all. I know a lot of other people can, though.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
What was the response to your local scene with Dreamer Deceiver?
Shockingly good. I really wish we could have kind of left the country with that band, but it's increasingly difficult as Canadians to kind of get out of the country, especially down to the US. But we had tremendous support. I'm surprised at how well things went over with that band. To date, it's some of my favorite music I've ever written, and we're really good friends to this day, even though we've since disbanded.
Did you guys do any touring with that group?
Yeah, we did quite a few tours. So we were only an active band for about a year and a half since we dropped Generations and then started doing tours. We did 6 tours and quite a few off shows in different cities around Ontario. They were great. Our last tour we did was with 1 year later, and Everyone Dies in Utah, who's now on In Vogue. That was a great time, actually.
So after that, you moved over to the Prestige.
Yeah, that's correct. So just after Dreamer Deceiver had announced we were done in April 2015, Seb had approached me around May to do the Vertebroken tour where I met you, which is pretty cool. So I learned their set in a couple weeks, and off we went.
I was around for the end of it, and definitely didn't sound like the greatest situation to be in, but I suppose that's part of the gig.
Yeah, coming in, we didn't know each other all that well, and we didn't kind of know what the band's history was or what they were sitting on. So, not everything always works out. Sometimes tours can go straight down the drain, and that's kind of what happened right at the end. Everybody kind of blew up on one dude in particular, and it caused quite a few problems, but that tour was such an adventure, and it was such a good time in every other aspect of that I really can't say I had a bad time.
So let's talk about your current project, The Northern. How'd you get involved with that?
So after coming back from the Vertebroken tour, I knew quite a few people around town. I'd go out and see people. They knew I wasn't in a band at the time, so a few people kind of were asking me what I wanted to do next. And I was actually out buying burritos, and the current guitar player for the Northern, Jordan, he approached me and he's like, "Hey man, we need a guitarist." And he's like, "I'll get our vocalist to message you." So Nick hit me up and he sent me some songs and he's like, "Hey, can you learn these and then come do a practice?" So I was like, "Sure." The music was actually fairly challenging, so I found that intriguing, and I wanted to do something that was kind of hard and technical. And I learned their songs, showed up for a practice, and I didn't at the time realize the band was just coming out of being a studio project, so they hadn't really done much other than just release an EP. And the rest is kind of history. I mean, we started writing. I brought in Adam Linka, who was in the Prestige as well. He is a great, clean vocalist, and he's a very good drummer. And I brought the bass player in from Dreamer Deceiver, Gordon. Together we wrote Solstice, which released this past year in January.
Which is a great record, by the way.
Thanks, man. Yeah. I really wanted to write something that was a good entry point that connected with a lot of people. My friend Jeff, who actually was in Be the Savior with me, he would come down regularly. We live about 5 hours away, and he'd come down regularly, and he really helps me bang out some ideas and write parts and all sorts of stuff. So he was a great help for writing that as well.
Nice.
Yeah, and then we followed that up with the Summer Solstice tour we just did not that long ago, which went off pretty well. I mean, Canada's not always the greatest to tour in because there's a lot of nothing. But we recently went to record a single, and we're going to shoot a music video for that soon. So we've been a little quiet, but things are on the horizon, which look very exciting for us. So
this time around, you're on Tragic Hero Records. How has that been?
That's correct. We love Tragic. They've been very, very helpful. They actually genuinely care about us and care about what we're doing. They have great insight, and they really help us do what we need. I mean, we wouldn't be where we are without their help right now. And things are only looking up now that we have some kind of foundation under our feet to work forward from. So that's really cool.
How's the response to Solstice been?
Honestly, mind-blowing in a sense, I guess. I didn't think writing a record would kind of get us that much recognition that quickly, I guess. I didn't really realize how much it had hit home with a few people, especially a few tracks on there, Umbra being the last song. When we played this last tour, it was actually kind of surreal. We were playing, and I heard the chorus being sung, and I thought it was coming out the monitors, and I'm like, man, we didn't backtrack this. What's happening? The whole venue was singing the song with us, and that was kind of the moment I was like, yeah, I could hear it over us playing, and that was kind of the moment where I'm like, man, I didn't know people liked us this much. This is awesome.
Right.
Yeah.
I had a similar experience with that when we were out on the Macho Man run, and we were playing this super beat up venue in Syracuse, New York. And it's literally one of those non-venue situations where it's like this warehouse, and it's got a bunch of beater cars in it, and it's got this weird platform that's got a half pipe behind it, and then the band's set up in the half pipe.
Oh, man.
We had just released Use Your Burdens in Christmas Day, so it was just a few months after that, and kids were screaming the words to some of the new songs at us, and it was just exactly like what you're talking about, where it's wow, this is actually working.
Yeah, it's such a good feeling. It's a really good feeling.
So you mentioned a little bit about what's coming up for the remainder of the year. Anything big coming up for 2018?
Well, we're currently, I can't say who just yet, but we're about to announce that we're working with a U.S. booker, an agent down there. So we're hopefully going to get some stuff that we can leave the country again, because obviously getting out of the country is awesome. It's quite the adventure. So we're hoping to announce a couple tours, hopefully in the spring, or if not, aiming for one to start in the spring. We also have a single coming up, like I said. I'm not sure exactly when we'll be done that entire process, but it will be quite a good change of pace for us, I believe. And yeah, I mean, the sky's the limit. We want to do as much as we can within reason. Obviously, we don't want to ruin ourselves, but...
All right, so let's change the conversation up a bit here and let's talk about gear. What's your signal chain looking like these days?
Awesome. So I recently ditched my Mesa Triple Rec. I had a whole pile of things going on there. I'm currently running the Pod HD Pro X, the rack version. I think are you still using the same one as well?
Yes, sir. Did you get that HD metal pack for it?
I didn't, actually. I'm just using some stock stuff on it. But the way I run, so I guess I'll start with my main guitars. I have two Agiles, same as you.
Yep.
Love them. They're great guitars. My main one is the Agile Pendulum Pro. It's got beautiful blue finish, EMGs. EMGs are cool because they have sustain quite a bit, and for my playing style, it works out great. It's a fan fret, 25.5 to 27 scale. I can't go back to regular guitars. I see them crooked. It's pretty weird. But yeah, and then my backup's Agile Scepter, just the baseline model. It's pretty good for what it is. So live, I kind of have two interesting chains. One is I have a clean chain, and in my clean chain, so coming into my amp, I use a G30 wireless. It's an okay wireless. If you're too close to a modem, though, I end up having quite a few problems, surprisingly. Or if a GoPro is right behind me, because they both output in 2.4 hertz, which I guess can create some problems for the signal. But that goes into a TS9 tube screamer in the back, and then into the ISP decimator, and then into the pod. And that kind of gives me more of like a real sounding push, which I like, because I'm not using a real amp. But sounds great, so I can't complain. So in my signal chain on the pod, I'm just using most of the stock settings, some comps and EQ, a lot of little tiny tweaks that add up together pretty well. And for my dirty lead, I just have the stock delay that comes on the pod. For my clean effects chain, and I had a lot of trouble deciding how to do this because I'm not big on having a bunch of... I really want to, one click and forget it. So for my clean chain, I have a Strymon Timeline and a Strymon Blue Sky, which are awesome, awesome pedals. And on the pod, I don't even run an amp. And what I do is I just run the DI and use the Strymons plus my tube screamer to kind of get a little bit of a push on it. Sounds really nice. I run the two Strymons through the effects loop in the chain, and everything else runs directly into the front. And then I'm using the ART SLA2 power amp. I don't overly care for that too much, though. But I wanted to kind of get away from running a head and a rack. So I wanted it to be idiot-proof, quick setup, so I could be on and off without too many problems and nothing failing on me.
So let's have a discussion about the Eternal Mile. When was your first tour, and what was the lineup?
My first tour would have been 2010, and I did it with a band called Mercenaries and another band called Forever Cadence from here in Canada. They were from across the province, and if you know, Ontario's very big. So we kind of did like a show trade-off. So they did like 4 days and we did 4 days or 3 days, whatever it was, from our area to their area. And then we filled a couple dates solo ourselves in between. It was an adventure. One of the shows we played, we showed up at like a broken down apartment building and we knock on the door. We're like, this can't be the venue. Some like bald punk lady answers the door. There's like a flipped over couch and a broken TV in the middle of the venue. And we're like, oh no, what's happening? so like there was some interesting stuff, but I mean, we were very well prepared, I guess, for that tour. So I can't say we had a rough start, which was pretty nice because I know a lot of bands sometimes struggle a bit on their first goes.
Between touring and local shows, do you have any idea how many shows you've actually done?
Oh boy. Just in BTS alone, I know in our first year of being a band, we did 118 shows.
Wow.
Yeah, so I want to say I've done around 450 shows ish. I can't, and that's like over 7 years or so. Like I can't, that's just a wild guess. but yeah, I've played a lot.
Do you have any particular markets that you enjoy playing in?
Well, here in Canada, I really, really like London. London's an awesome city. We have a ton of friends there. The venue is awesome. Same thing with Quebec. Quebec's always great. Everybody's really friendly. We have a ton of friends there as well, so it's always a good time. Outside of that, a few places I actually really enjoyed when we were on the Verta Broken tour was I loved Salt Lake City, even though we actually didn't play that day. The city's beautiful, so it's all those little things that really make the entire experience enjoyable. And I really liked California as well, but I'm sure everybody says that one. So,
how about favorite venues?
Again, London has a venue called Rum Runners, which we played on the Summer Solstice tour that just passed. And that venue was awesome. I also really enjoyed, surprisingly, I enjoyed the Outhouse in Kent, Ohio.
Oh, the Outpost.
The Outpost. That's it. Yeah. Yeah, that one was great. That was fun. And they had a dog there, so I thought that was sweet.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, it wasn't like an amazing venue, but it was really it's pretty cool. Like I don't know, I thought it was cool.
Favorite city to have a day off in?
San Jose, California, for sure. We had a great time. There's one place I really still want to go there that I didn't get to go when I was there, so it's on my bucket list. There's a bar, it's a gamer lounge called AFK Gamer Lounge. And apparently it's just a bar where you play a lot of games and stuff, but it looks really cool. So it's on my bucket list for next time I'm down there.
With you being Canadian but still having some experience, as you've said here, playing in the U.S., how would you compare the U.S. to Canada in regards to music scenes?
Canada can be very hit or miss. But when Canada's like a hit, it's awesome. But when it's a miss, it's like a real bad time. In the U.S., I find the scene it's a little bit more consistent. But when it's a miss, it's not nearly as bad because there's always going to be, a decent amount of things to do or people that come to the venue, and bands are just a little bit more supportive of each other there. Yeah, I don't know. You guys definitely live in the right place, that's for sure.
What would you consider to be the biggest rookie mistake on tour?
A lot of bands that go on their first tour treat it the same way they would treat it a one-off. But you can't be up every night as late as you can, partying as hard as you can, because you'll blow yourselves out in a couple days, and everybody's miserable. One person gets sick, everyone gets sick, and negativity spreads, and everybody's having a really bad time. You're fighting, and everybody runs out of money because you're spending it all on partying and doing dumb stuff. And just be healthy, be clean. Take care of yourselves. That's pretty important. Make a lot of friends.
Top 3 must-have tour items.
Well, I'm sure this is on the top of most people's list, but baby wipes.
Yep.
It's a shower in a box. Water. You can never have enough. Fill your trailer with it. Whenever you start to feel a little hoarse or you feel a little sick or you haven't slept enough, you are mostly water, so drink a ton of that. And the third one, honestly, something to keep you sane, something to keep you occupied. I play a lot of Game Boy, so I'll bring that around or whatever. But sometimes it's nice to shut yourself off from the other members because you are living in a van together, and the last thing you want to do is start fighting. So if you kind of have your own thing to do in your own little area in the van, it can do wonders for everybody's kind of mental state if you're having a bad time.
All right, one of the great debate questions. Catering or buyout?
Buyout for sure.
I think I'm in the same boat with you on that one.
Yeah, I'm not always hungry at night, or sometimes maybe, I ate 10 minutes before coming in the venue and I'd prefer maybe to buy a drink, or, I want to save it to tomorrow, or there's, an arcade game, or or sometimes catering. For instance, I'm vegetarian, so sometimes catering doesn't always go my way, or I get a lot of food that I can necessarily eat. So, having a buyout, you can do whatever you want with that later. And if you're really struggling, well, your buyout goes in the gas tank.
Yep. Yeah, I've found that, don't get me wrong, I've had some great catering over, all my touring that I've done, but there's just something about like, hey, cool, we don't have to dip into the guarantee that much harder now.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, you can always you can only eat Little Caesars so many days in a row.
Yep. Yeah.
So
we've had downgraded from that. We had, I think it was 2 shows in a row in Florida where we had 7-Eleven pizza.
Oh my.
Yeah, it was different. It was definitely different.
I've never tried that before, and I hope I don't have to.
How many people say, boy, I really wish this was Little Caesars?
Yeah. 7-Eleven food's kind of a horror show sometimes.
Yeah.
I remember when we were in Olean, because you guys have some interesting food items compared to us. And when we were in Olean, there was a gas station, I think, like just across the road or down the street just a little bit. There was a 7-Eleven, and I went in there. And I was like, what can I get to eat? And I didn't want a lot of nasty stuff, and I didn't want to eat a bag of chips. So they had these they were basically Cheese Whiz filled, breaded, deep fried, Dorito crusted.
Yeah. Yeah, the blasted things or whatever. Yeah.
So I bought a pack of them. I think they were 3. And I thought it was a good idea. So I went back and bought another pack, and I ate that, and it was totally not a good idea. Oh, man, I never felt so sick in my life. It's terrible.
It's funny now because apparently those were really, really popular, and now you can go buy them at the grocery store.
Oh, wow.
So now you can get diarrhea from home.
Yeah, no, I wish. I really wish we had Uncrustables here. I know it's like a little kid food, but we never had those growing up here. So it's like,
those are the best.
I got my hands on those. It's amazing.
Yeah, those are the best, and there's no reason for it to be that good.
Yeah, no, exactly. I don't know. I want some.
So in my experience on the road, I've found that a lot of people have misconceptions about what it is that we do, and in many cases, it's often over glamorized. What's some of the wilder things you've been asked or told in regards to what we do?
I don't necessarily think this is too wild, but I often get asked, so your only job is to play music? And I'm like, no, no way. There's no way I can sustain myself just on that. But, a lot of people assume it's like a rock star life, and it really isn't. It's 3 sweaty dudes or 5 sweaty dudes hating each other in a van, driving for 15 hours, and then playing a show for, $100, and then we have to somehow either divvy it up or stuff it in the gas tank, keep going. So it's not as much as a party, I think, as people make it out. Hope it is, but that's the dream, right?
Right. So to further that point, let's go over some of the less glamorous moments in your career. Do you have any horror stories while on stage?
I've had gear fail a few times, but I guess that's not nothing too crazy. But the worst thing that's ever happened to me on stage was when I played a 6-string in 2011. I was playing a show at my hometown in Ottawa, so all my friends were there, everybody. So this makes it super embarrassing for me. But so we were on stage, we were playing. It was mid-set, and I did a guitar flip with my favorite guitar I saved forever, and I dropped $4,000 on this ESP Eclipse, not an LTD. And I did a spin. It came back. It felt good. I didn't think I hit anything, and I noticed one of my strings is broken, and I'm like, oh, whatever. So my buddy from the other band, I just passed him the guitar. He gave me one of my other ones. Quick trade off, no big deal. And then at the end of our set, he came back to me. He's like, dude, you're going to cry. I'm like, what? The headstock snapped.
Oh,
on my guitar. Yeah. So I was like, that was super bummer, because right after I'm like, oh no, I smashed my best guitar I have. Sucks.
I have a story I can share that's not necessarily a horror story for me, but it is for my bass player, JT. So it was on the run just before we went into Canada, because obviously he didn't come with us.
Yeah.
We were in Austin, Texas, and as you know, it's just madness on stage when we play. And we both have huge instruments, so it's just like,
Yeah.
hey, who's into getting hit with a 2x4? So
Yeah, exactly.
we were playing, and sometimes you'll get in your own zone, almost very like tunnel vision-esque when you're on stage. And out of my peripheral vision, I can see JT just doing something weird, and I can't figure it out. And so I finally look over, and he's like on the ground, and he's still playing, and I'm thinking, this dude is not going to upstage me right now. So I literally took my guitar off me and just started like just pushing it and punching it and all that kind of stuff and like kicking it because it was like a noisy section. And come to find out after the fact, he had put his like foot up on one of the monitors and kind of leaned into it a little too much, and it like pivoted and it made him like twist his ankle, and he fell over, and he was in like excruciating pain. And here I am thinking, man, me. But yeah, that was so shot though, because like he fell, it snapped off one of his tuning pegs, and which thankfully we were going to we were heading up to Fort Worth, and there happened to be this like hardware shop that had the exact or I don't think it was the exact tuning pegs, but I think he just replaced all of like the tuning pegs with a whole new set. And but yeah, that was just so funny to me. Like we're always trying to do something crazy, and well, I guess at that point, I guess the joke was on me.
Yeah, some crazy stuff happens, man. It's awesome. But when you look back at it, it's awesome.
So I actually know the answer to this one, I'm pretty sure, but I'll go ahead and ask it anyway. Any major transportation issues leaving you stranded?
Okay, I got two good ones.
Okay.
I've been really lucky for some reason, and I've only been through like kind of two major breakdowns. The first one, this was like, again, like 2010, 2011. Can't remember what we were doing. We were going to the studio, or we were going somewhere, and we had this. This was with Be the Savior. We had literally the worst van you could have bought. It was an old electrician van from like the 80s. It was a huge piece of garbage. The only reason we traded a bus company 2 CDs and a T-shirt to put seats in the back. Like it was trashed. I think when we killed it, we had I'm going to try to figure out the miles, something like 500,000 miles, 600,000 miles on it. Like we rolled it over in kilometers. Like it was like 800,000 kilometers, whatever that is.
Jeez.
So yeah. So we were driving down the road, and we hear the snap, and we're like, oh no, what's happening? And the base of the steering column, I guess, broke, and the steering wheel just started going in circles, and we're like, oh no, we're gonna die. We didn't die. We were fine. but it was horrifying for a quick minute. And the next one actually happened on the Vertebroken tour. Was we were going up the nasty Grapevine in that beast of an RV we had. And I guess the radiator like exploded on us. So we got stranded there for quite some time. And if it wasn't for Corey, we would have ended up staying there overnight on the side of the highway with our trailer, because the towing company wouldn't take it. So we were all sleeping. Oh, we were so pitiful when Corey picked us up. We still owe him our lives for that one. But the towing company we called, they're like, well, we'll tow your RV, but we won't take your trailer unless you pay for another tow truck. And we're like, how much is that? And they're like, $1,000. And we're like, oh, how about we just detach the trailer and 5 of us sleep in the ditch and 2 of us go with the RV? So we slept on the side of the highway with outside of Bakersfield until Corey came back from LA or Anaheim and took us back to his mom's house with the trailer, which was a really nice thing to do.
Yeah. I remember at the time the whole like Straight Outta Compton thing was happening. I remember you guys did the Straight Outta Radiator, and that was so funny.
Yeah, I never felt so defeated. Like, I mean, earlier that day I'd gotten kind of sick, so I wasn't feeling very well, and we spent the whole day in the sun outside because we broke down, right? So it was hotter inside the RV than it was outside in the wherever we were. So we broke down just outside like an apricot farm. So we spent the whole day outside, and I ended up feeling garbage. I ate too much fruits, and then just to add insult to injury, we had to sleep in the ditch.
Right.
Yeah, but the day before it was our like one hotel day that we had for like that second half of the that tour. So the day before we had gotten a nice hotel with Brandon in San Jose, which was awesome. So we went from living like kings to living like peasants really fast.
How about the worst promoter or just overall situation you've been in?
Again, we've gotten fairly lucky with promoters. Like, I mean, I haven't had too many terrible things happen. There's been times. Well, I guess it's pretty bad, but there's been times. Like one time we had a promoter. We were headlining a show. I can't remember where it was. This was with again one of my first bands. So like maybe 2012, and we were headlining a show, and halfway through our set, the promoter just took the whole till, didn't pay any band, and just disappeared off into the sunset. And we're like, oh man, it's always a bummer when people kind of do things like that. But honestly, I haven't had too many crazy, terrible things happen in terms of promoters. A lot of the agents we work with have been like super bang up dudes, so I really can't complain at all. I guess this last tour we just had, we got made fun of for having laminates. But
Really?
yeah, it was we had an off day, and we were like, we need to fill this. So we just kind of took a date in Barrie, Ontario. We just took like a random day. It wasn't at like a big venue or anything, but we had just played London's Rum Runners Music Hall before that. So that's like a massive venue. It holds quite a few people. So like obviously laminates are useful there. But then we went to the other venue, and the venue owner promoter was like making fun of us for having laminates, and like was giving us a hard time over sound check just because he didn't like us. And then he went on Facebook later and he posted some rant about how music is like talentless now because we have breakdowns and clean singing. It's like,
I'm so sorry that I brought people into your venue. I'm so sorry. I'll never do that again.
Yeah, I was just like, man, like, people paid to be here, and like there was a decent for like a last minute show, like there was a decent amount of people. Like I can't complain. Whatever. I mean, people are gonna hate, but the trick is to just keep on going and know who not to work with again.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Lastly, what's one of the most random things to happen to you on tour or at a show?
Well, I guess it's kind of our fault for putting ourselves in some situations once in a while. I used to play, like, we'd take almost anything, like even though the shows were kind of weird or whatever. And there were some high schools that were having prom parties. So yeah, so basically, because I grew up like way out in the country, kind of. So there was like 5 high schools in our area. So we were like, yo, let's play some of these high school dates. So we ended up playing like 3 out of 5 of the dates, or 4 out of 5. It was 2 weekends. And they had built this massive stage in the woods, pretty much on some guys, like on some farmer's like backyard, and he'd host the party, and all the kids, they'd come, they'd have big fires, they'd camp there. Basically a huge party. And I don't regret taking the show because they actually paid us really well for doing it. But we were just before we were playing, the kids were launching fireworks, they're whipping bottles, just a bunch of drunk high school kids like misbehaving. So we started playing, and then some kids thought it'd be smart to like start blasting fireworks at the stage while we're playing. And we're like, oh my God, man, this is not going to end well. Nothing ended up happening. Nobody got like hit or hurt. And a bunch of people put a stop to it. But I mean, there was like 500 kids there. It was basically an entire high school population partying to some metal bands. So it was cool, but I mean, don't throw stuff at the band.
Right.
Yeah. That's probably the most random, stupid thing that's happened, I guess. There's always all sorts of little things that happen all the time, but that's like pretty notable. That still stands out, 6 years later. So
I'm curious to hear what advice you'd have to a few groups of people.
And let's start with local bands. Not necessarily local to your scene, but just in general.
I want to reiterate how important what the other things that your other guests said about, make a lot of friends, make sure you stick around, like all those things are important. But those things have been said. So I want to kind of say something a bit different, I guess. And that would be, don't rush your releases. One of the main things I see a lot of entry level bands do is, they'll spend all sorts of money on recording, get all excited. Everybody's excited for it. And then they throw it on like Zippy Share in a zip file and then post it on their Facebook. And they're like, here's our record for free. And then they just handed out all their songs right away. And it's kind of like, well, now what are you going to do for the rest of the year or until you record music again? You kind of got to spread those things out, take your time, engage with your audience, get them excited, maybe put out a video, 1 song, 2 songs, and then eventually, release your full record. If you give up all your chips at once, you have nothing to keep some presence in the eyes of fans that are continuously being bombarded with, check out my band, listen to this is new music here, new YouTube stuff, new video games came out. You want to make sure you're always doing something of relevance in front of people that are paying attention.
Advice to promoters.
If you don't have the money to book a package already, don't book it. Because if it goes to flop, you still need to pay those bands because they're coming from you don't even know how far half the time. And, even especially if it's like $100 or $300, that's not that much money for a couple bands to ask that are just trying to, make by. So if you don't, if you're a promoter and you're going to put on shows, you got to be prepared to lose sometimes. And you always got to make right with your bands. They have to get to where they're going the next day. And the other one is, actually promote. Simply making a Facebook event doesn't necessarily always bring kids to shows. You got to get out there, you got to sell tickets, you got to make flyers, you got to get the right local bands on the package or on the bill for that date. Make sure they're good support and they're going to sell tickets and draw, especially for out of town bands. You got to show everybody support.
Lastly, advice to bands hitting the road for the first time.
Try not to be too negative with each other, because I know bands can fight a lot and that really ruins it for everybody. Once somebody gets a little bit negative, everybody will start kind of bickering with each other, and that's, it shows on stage that you guys aren't having a good time and that you hate each other. Fans feel that, and if they can't connect with you, you won't have that loyal fan base coming back. Again, make as many friends as you can, talk to everyone. If you've never met people at a venue, everyone should leave knowing who you are by the end of the night. And stay clean and stay healthy, because that can put a real damper on things very quickly.
So before we go, is there anything you'd like to plug?
Sure. So I play in the Northern, obviously. You can check us out on facebook.com/the Northern Canada. We have a single coming out sooner or later. It's not a secret we went to record, but I'm not going to tell you what too much it is. And we have some announcements coming up as well that I can't totally speak about, but I do know that you guys will be really stoked on it because we're really stoked on it. So,
Eric, thank you so much for coming on the show. Great to catch up with you again, and hopefully our paths cross again soon.
Thanks, man. I'm really glad to be here. I'm really glad that you're getting into podcasts, because I love podcasts, and it's great to support a friend who's doing something. So I'm really stoked you asked me to be on.
That concludes this episode. I'd like to thank Eric for being on the show. Be sure to check out The Northern and all of Eric's previous bands. Also, don't forget to check out those 2 tours mentioned earlier in the show. Be sure you're following the show on social media, subscribe in your podcast app, and if you enjoy the show, stop on over to Patreon and show your support. I've been Noah Sias, and as always, thank you for listening.